You're now host, Sherry.
Okay. Thank you, Olga.
Let's wait for a couple of more minutes to let others join.
Welcome, everyone. And we're just giving a few people a minute to join, but welcome to our grant making and I guess exploring fundraising ideas workshop with the UN Habitat Youth Advisory Board. And this workshop is, I guess it's like an advertisement, is brought to you by UN Habitat Youth and the Young Gamechangers initiative. My name is Dr. Sherry Enns. I am a consultant on the Young Gamechangers initiative, but I also am based at a university in Canada. So what I want to do is begin, I guess, with a bit of an overview and welcome everyone that's joined us in the Zoom room, as well as those that are joining via YouTube, and begin by asking if you are on the Youth Advisory Board, if you could just for a quick second turn on your camera and say your name. That would be great. And just while you're organizing to do that, I want to thank Olga for all the work she's done to put this workshop together. So, so I don't have to call out your name, just start. I can see Balerin's picture, so maybe start with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. This workshop. I'm Valerie from Colombia, and I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Board from UN Habitat. So nice to meet you, everyone. Hope you enjoy.
Okay, just going down and just go ahead and say your names. I see Sarah.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. I'm super excited for today's workshop. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the UN Habitat Youth Advisory Board members, and I'm based in Canada.
I believe there are others here as well. Just please, if you're on the Youth Advisory Board, say your name, and if you're able, turn on your camera.
Hi everyone, this is Daria from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. I'm also part of the Youth Advisory Board. Excited to be here today.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lala Safarli from Azerbaijan. I'm also a member of the UN Youth Advisory Board and happy to be here.
Okay. Anyone else from the Youth Advisory Board here?
Yes. Hello,
Go
everyone.
ahead.
I'm Zaina from Egypt. I'm also a member of the Youth Advisory Board, and I'm an assistant professor of sustainable architecture and urban design from Egypt. And I'm very happy to be here with you all. Thank you, Dr. Cherie and Olga and everyone for being here.
Thank you. Did we miss anyone? I know, Karun, you're not on the Youth Advisory Board, but anyone else that's UN Habitat? I don't see Doug here, so maybe you can be the stand-in for Doug and welcome us all.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Karun Koenig. I am a mentor for the Youth Advisory Board and a longtime consultant and collaborator with UN Habitat. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the workshop. And thank you, Dr. Sherry Enns, for hosting us and leading us through this very important topic. And of course, to Olga for organizing everything. We're looking forward to a very stimulating event. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't know if Mary wants to say hi, and if we've missed any other Youth Advisory Board members, this is your last chance. Mary?
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad and I'm part of the Youth Advisory Board. I'm from Yemen and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Mary?
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Hioho. I work with UN Habitat with Douglas and Olga. Thank you so much for this workshop.
Okay, well, thank you. And I hope there's going to be a lot more opportunities to interact, but we only have an hour. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background. We did send out a survey to the Youth Advisory Board members and some of the young Gamechangers as well, that hopefully we'll get a chance to meet throughout this next hour. And some of the points that they put forward as really interesting or important for them to explore further was, how do you find sources for funding, theory of change, a little bit of everything, if you will, and we can't do it all. So I'll try my best to highlight some key points, noting that many of the Youth Advisory Board members are experts on their own right in terms of proposal writing. And so at any point, their comments in the chat, as well as putting their cameras on and sharing, this is very welcome. The next point I wanted to share is we're going to have a little bit of fun with this. And when it gets to be about 1:45, we will have some of the group members that filled out the survey sent in their ideas. So we're going to give them 1 minute to pitch their ideas, and there's going to be a prize that will help them in their next stage of proposal development. So this is the idea, and I apologize that not everyone could participate in that aspect, but I think we will learn from watching and observing, as well as just taking the time to reflect on our own ideas. So briefly, we're going to begin with, we've already done introductions, but some key concepts. We're going to talk about how we define the challenge, a little bit on theory of change, funding sources, and then move to our competition. And the last stage really moves outside of our hour. And that's where we're going to begin to think about next steps and even matchmaking, if you will. Perhaps there are those that are in this session that would like to join in the next step of writing a proposal. And that would be really an exciting outcome, I feel, of this session. There's also someone else I hope will join us towards the end, who director for Coca-Cola Africa, their foundation. And there was quite a few of you that mentioned in the survey, you're really interested in how to pitch to the corporate sector. So I'm hoping Stephen will be able to join a little bit later in this session. So first, just in terms of key concepts, we're really focusing on health and well-being, urban youth in urban environments. And we're interested in concepts that will bring about positive change, but centered in that change as the youth voice and the youth ideas. So let's briefly differentiate, or at least put forward two different concepts. One is youth-led grant making, and Karun, at any point, feel free to interject, or any of the other experts in the room. And here, this is generally defined as involving young people in solving problems, proposals, budgets, working together, but it's very much it's youth-led, but youth-involved. And then there's participatory grant making, which really comes from the other direction, if you will. It's from the donor. And this encompasses a range of models. Increasingly, donors are recognizing the importance of involving those affected by the funding in decisions around the grants. And so those are not mutually exclusive, but two really important concepts. And I feel an ideal space to be moving into is where youth are not just leading grant making or being consulted, but are actually the grantee in terms of being involved in deciding who gets funding in terms of proposals. So if we look across the sector, increasingly it's very competitive. And yet at the same time, the proposal processes often filled with a whole range of inequities. So that means that those most directly impacted tend to be the least involved at times. And proposals can be very labor intensive, and this hinders progress and wastes resources. And so this quote comes from a large foundation. And so we'll keep that in our back of our mind as we begin to explore where the opportunities are, but recognize there is a challenge in this system. But the bright side of this is that donors are beginning to really understand the importance of partnering with the beneficiaries, and not only with the beneficiaries, but also with the groups that really could be involved in administering and doing the work. And so one of the key ideas that's being put forward in terms of designing your idea for a proposal is human-centered design. And human-centered design involves us really creating an empathy map. So beginning to think about who is it, not just who are the donors, because we need to understand them as well in terms of partnering, but also who are the beneficiaries, but then who are we as a group or an individual or an organization that's submitting the grant. And so empathy at the core of grant making is a really exciting direction in the way grants are going. And so becoming a partner with the donor themselves, but also at the heart of the funding process, organizations such as Global Fund for Children are beginning to realize that they really need to use a human-centered design process and to center empathy, thinking of the other. So a lot of the early work on this looked at the persona of the donor. So trying to understand who the donor is. But now what we're saying, we're really shifting to begin to understand who the beneficiary is. And we use tools, could use tools like personas but also, as I was already inferring, a persona of the youth organizations. So we can really begin to match the organization with the vision of the donor, with at the center of that, the beneficiaries. So let me stop now by saying that I have provided a link to this presentation. And really what will be most valuable will be accessing a lot of the links, including a lot of the potential partners. So let's start here. So if we were going to begin to write our proposal, really at the core, we have some idea that there's a problem out there or an issue that we'd like to address. And so many of you, and I'll just ask those the youth participants, the Youth Advisory Board, or anyone that's in the Zoom room, what's a problem that comes to mind that you would like to address? And I know there's 10 of you that actually put forward ideas already. And even if you want to turn your camera on and we could just hear a couple of them, and I might pick on a few of you, but for example, let's go with Daria. I know there's a challenge or an issue or an idea that you have. I think you're still in the room. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you?
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Okay. So one challenge that I'm currently working on is the air pollution issue in my city and how it's disproportionately affecting the people who are living on the outskirts of the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So,
And
sorry. Keep going.
how, because yeah.
Okay.
No,
So
we can start from there.
Okay, let's start from there. So if that's the problem that Daria would like to address, what would be key next is framing that as a question. So if the problem is that air pollution for people living on the outskirts, that's the problem you want to solve. So then you need to take a stab at turning it around and asking it as a question. How can we address this in the specific context of where Daria lives? And so what I'd like to suggest that all of you that are in the Zoom room take a minute to think, and those of you on YouTube, what is a problem that you would really like to try to solve? Because we can't obviously solve all challenges in all cities everywhere for youth, but is there a challenge that comes to mind? And you can even just put it in the chat. And can you turn it around and then ask it as a question? Frame it as a design question, if you will, because then you can begin to think about possible solutions to that problem. And we need to narrow it enough that we can actually begin to write a proposal that makes sense to a donor. So just give you a second, and I'm hoping some of you in the chat will write a challenge that you would really like to address. And you don't have to be young to do it, whoever's here. That would be great. So just give you a sec. Go ahead, Corinne.
And Sherry, are we just to write this for ourselves, or are we to write it in the chat, or?
Yeah, write it in the chat just to share. But those that are on YouTube could use comments, or they could just think you're right in their own minds. Yeah, what's a challenge you would like to solve? So just I can see we've got one, I think. Okay. Yeah, a challenge you would like to solve. Okay. Safety issues in public spaces. Okay. Can you start to then begin to think about how you could frame that as a question? So what aspect of public space, how can we begin to make public spaces in a certain area more safe? So you just begin to see how taking a problem and turning it around to a specific question, greater access to clean water. So how can we begin to address cholera in urban areas? That comes from Karun. and begin to narrow it enough in terms of how to ask a question and then to begin to design activities that would address that challenge. And so the really exciting aspect, as people are just adding into the chat, is design thinking allows us to think about the end user. So really show empathy, to define your challenge, ask a question, and then begin to think of solutions, recognizing that it will never be linear. In fact, we might have to go through several rounds before we really begin to understand that that challenge that we've just identified cannot be addressed in the way we originally thought. We may have to choose a different approach or a different method. And what I want to share right now is that I think the most successful proposal writers have had a lot of failure. Now, it's easy to talk about our success, but often harder to talk about our failure. And one of the areas we may fail is that the donor doesn't clearly understand the relationship between the challenge and the strategies that you want to put in place to begin to address that challenge. Okay, so hold those thoughts, and we're going to just build on that in a few other ways. And I really appreciating the comments in the chat, and keep those going, please. So theory of change. Who here thinks they're an expert in creating a theory of change? I know, actually, Karun is an expert in creating theory of change. So simply defined, and I know from the survey that for many of you, this is a challenging area, but you've also had experience doing this. So it's a diagram or picture of how and why a desired change is expected. And it thinks now also not just about that challenge or that ultimate vision, but actions that could really move towards creating that change. So it's helping explain the relationship between the problem and the actions that you're putting on paper or beginning to explore. So we need to start to identify a long-term goal and work back from that to identify how we can move forward to achieve that long-term goal. So it's really talking about causal relationships between that challenge you've identified and that ultimate goal. So if your goal is about safety, I mean, ultimate vision would be that everyone feels safe in public spaces, but how do you kind of narrow it and work backwards from that? So again, in this presentation are resources that you can go to where there's actually templates and you can play with this idea. This is a pretty standard looking template. So you can see how using the design framework or design challenge that I started with, you can start filling this in, and you can go to the link and actually grab the template of it when you're ready in the coming weeks. But what is the problem you're trying to solve? Who's your key audience? What's the entry point for beginning to reach them? And then what steps do you need to bring about change? But even more importantly, how are you going to measure that you've actually achieved that change? How many of you have worked on projects or know of proposals that say they've got this long-term goal at the end, but when you begin to look at how they're trying to address it, it hardly connects to the problem or the steps in between. So really, one of the most brilliant ways to do this is to start on my right-hand side. What is that long-term change you want to see as your goal? And then work backwards to the problem that you would like to try to solve. So this becomes like a puzzle and really a lot of fun, if you will. And I don't know, Karun, you want to give your two best tips on creating a theory of change?
Sure. I think so. We do a lot of. I work for UN Habitat, as well as I manage the operations for a water and sanitation charity that does a lot of corporate fundraising. And while I don't have tons of direct contact with the donors anymore, because I'm more on the operational side, I used to also manage a youth environmental charity that did a ton of grant writing. And I also manage a cultural facility in Canada. So I've got a lot of experience in the NGO sector for the past, I don't know, 3 decades or so. And I think one of the things that I would say about your about your theory of change is exactly what the tip that Sherry just mentioned is, at the end of the day, the donor wants to be able to stand next to something or be able to describe something very easily and have it be quite obvious that that thing or that object had some effect in the world. They want to actualize or operationalize their values. So you're actually selling to that person. And it's sometimes helpful to see the charity sector as a little bit like a business sector, except for that you're trying to basically operationalize values. So somebody has your client or your customer has a value of a few things, right? They might value a clean environment. They might value a certain kind of human rights. They might value worker rights. They might value a certain kind of economic development within their customer base or community. And so you need to figure out what not only how does your strategy link to your ultimate vision, but also how does that help the client actualize their values? So if you're talking to, for example, the Nike Foundation, which had a long-standing, I'm not sure if they do anymore, dedication to the girl effect, which basically said that if you give money to female heads of households, that they generally tend to spend it on more productive investments to assist their families. So if you're looking at that, is there a way that you could link that to the strategy that you choose for air quality? Is there any way that favoring or focusing on investments or involving young women or women in general that you could link to your choice of strategy? Because there's many strategies you could choose to link. So that would be one of the things, is to really think about your customer, which is the donor, and what they're actually after is you think about it as a concrete, or let's say either a concrete narrative they can point to, a story of the events that contributed to the actualization of their values, an object, something, right? That they can easily say, we had this done, or we constructed this, or we were supportive of this process. And it's quite obvious that this aligns very directly with our values, and we want to see our values actualized. And that's sort of my number one tip, is to really think about it from both your end goal perspective and to choose a strategy that both meets your end goal and might help the client or your donor actualize their values. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karun. And I just wanted to add this image because you can show it in pictures and graphics as well, because often our communication needs to sort of stand out if there's opportunity within the grant. And you might want to look at an organization called Youth Cafe, because they have a really colorful and interesting theory of change on their website. So directly, and we're not going to take a lot of time here because I want to move more to the, where to look for funding ideas. But out of the theory of change, if you can see here, this section on measurable effects, those indicators that begin to fill in there are your monitoring and evaluation. And so again, what I've done is link some sources here. So this just connects the theory of change to indicators, because that is going to be how you're going to measure the impact or tell your story of the impact. And I've also provided a platform, it's Kanaki. There's a free version that's worth using. The paid for version would only be if you have the funding in your grant, because it's a little bit more costly. But the free version is really interesting for building both your theory of change, but as well your indicators. Okay, so now let's hear from 3 youth experts that have had some success in funding. And I've asked them to do no more than 3 minutes. So I'll ask Olga and Karun to keep us on time for that. And let's start with Valoran. So what success or what have you tried? And I was thinking you have a lot of strength in partnerships, but it's okay if you want to go somewhere else with that.
Okay, thank you so much. So in my case, I'm from the Young Gamechangers program that it's being held in Colombia, and my I have an idea because we have like more programs related with urban planning. So I had an idea of a change between this program, Young Gamechangers Initiative, and Vivo Mi Calle, that is another project from UN Habitat that is being held here in Colombia. So my idea of a change is to strengthen projects related with placemaking, where the UN Habitat program has participated. So especially sharing experiences between the youth involved in the Young Gamechangers Initiative in Armenia, that it's one of a city from Colombia, and Vivo Mi Calle, that it's in Cali, another city from Colombia. And there is a lot of interest to planify cities through youth participation in Cali's municipality. And it will be interesting if we learn more about the challenges, opportunities, and tools between each project as a way to build a new manifesto about how the urban planning processes could be better for youth-friendly cities, taking into account not only the experiences from each program leaders, but also the perceptions of different actors, such as mayors and youth councilors in different countries. At this moment, Young Gamechangers Initiative is at the official agenda of the Green Zone at the COP 16 of Biodiversity that it's going to be held in Cali, Colombia. And that's a great scenario to show the impact of these programs in the frame of making peace with nature in our city systems, but also to allow the change of experiences and perceptions already mentioned. So we are looking forward to that. And for relationships or partnerships, there are like 4 main focuses, I would say. First, confidence. You have to be sure about your ideas and your capacity to make a difference with the help of other allies. In my case, there was like the help of the leaders from each program, the majors from another countries, youth counselors. The second one is trust. You have to be sure about the viability of your proposals and not to build false expectations. It's really important to be honest about the limits and challenges of your idea and what can really be done. Third, compatibility. The partner must have similar objectives as yours or have similar projects. And fourth, constancy. You have to be clear about your responsibilities and roles from the beginning until the end and to keep working for the success of the project even with difficulties. So that's what I like to say.
Thank you so much. And so one of the points here is even without funding, it's possible to move your idea forward through partnerships, although partnerships often bring or mobilize resources. Thank you, Valerie. So Sarah, you are very successful at attending, speaking, participating in conference and events. Some of the respondents to the survey asked, how can we find funding? And I thought, Sarah, maybe you could just share a couple of your strategies.
Of course, thank you so much. So I think one of my biggest tips would be to take that first step in outreach and to identify like a series of organizations that you would like to build meaningful connections with. There's this famous saying, and I heard it at a conference, and it was like, don't wait for opportunities to come to you, but rather create the path to reach those opportunities. And I really loved that because it reminded me of how important it is to take that first step in outreach, and just like even like cold emailing and cold networking. So one of my biggest tips would be to reach out to organizations that align with your values or interests. That could be like a quick Google search or even like connecting with other youth groups, and then supporting their work. If you're also interested in exploring an intersection of the work that you do, for example, at one point I was really curious about virtual reality and climate. And so then just reaching out to organizations that explore these niches can help build your own understanding. But essentially, when you create those new connections with organizations, you can support their work, but at the same time, they get to learn more about the work you're doing, the value that you could bring to their organization, and in turn, might be interested in supporting, let's say, when you come across an event or require funding to attend, let's say, events. This can also go for conferences as well. If you're interested in attending a conference, I know sometimes conferences have paid tickets, even though you might be in the youth category. So reaching out to the organizer to attend and then sharing with them your portfolio and expressing your interest in attending is a great way to make connections and also potentially get even a free attendee pass as well. So sending an email to the conference organizer can lead to even public speaking opportunities. Sort of on that note as well, how I'd mentioned portfolio, I find that it's really important to create a website or portfolio digitally. When reaching out via email or let's say on LinkedIn as a cold outreach, it's really great to highlight the work that you've done through a portfolio that signifies your impact. And this allows, the person viewing your work to basically see the value that you can bring to their stage at the conference, or let's say as a delegate, or just even in the work that they're doing. I know Valerie had shared amazing tips on partnerships. So at the same time, through your portfolio, you should highlight why the work that you do matters to you, but at the same time, make it clear how it aligns with their values and as well their goals of, let's say, the conference. I think this is also really helpful as well because as you have an online presence, essentially other organizers can take a look at your website, and this may lead to other opportunities that you may not even have had to outreach to. Another thing would be to also highlight your topics of expertise, sort of creating like a brand or niche for yourself, if you will. So highlighting your areas of expertise is really important for credibility, and articulating that through, let's say, your website, your social media, or even that email that you send is really important so that organizations can see how your skills align with, let's say, the work or the mission that they have. This not only, let's say, builds trust for the role that you will go into, but also increases the likelihood of gaining support for the initiatives. LinkedIn is a really great tool for this, especially with the profile hashtags. People looking in the same industry would most likely come across your profile, and it can be very helpful when it comes to making new connections and eventually securing funding to attend events. My last tip would be to maintain relationships with previous event organizers. So, of course, facilitating the cold outreach can be successful, but I find it really important as well as or after you have spoken at an event, maintain contact with those organizers. Often those conferences are part of a much larger nonprofit or, for example, larger companies that do have resources to provide funding to youth. And so it's beneficial to reach out to them, express interest in attending a conference or, let's say, participating in an external event. And if funding is required, since you've been a part of their network before and supported their work, they're most likely to give you funding, but also offer something in return. So for example, previously, I've written like detailed reports for that organization or company after they provided funding based on the conference that I went to, giving a brief presentation at, let's say, their annual council meetings, or even just, let's say, if they are an organization that tends to host multiple webinars or conferences, offering to present at one of these events can be a valuable exchange.
Okay,
those are sort of my top tips.
Yeah, no, Sarah, those are amazing. And almost all the opportunities I'm about to share are also posted on LinkedIn. So Sarah's point to the LinkedIn profile is really important. Okay, Daria, you've done something quite innovative. So a little bit different than the other two. Can you briefly share your carbon credit project?
Yes, so the project that I'm currently working on in Mongolia is kind of transitioning coal burning household families into connecting them to the solar grid and utilizing kind of developing a carbon market in Mongolia along with our partners. And so kind of renewable energy and conjunction with the carbon market is very, very new in the Mongolian environment. And so like garnering support and trust and interest in our project and fundraising for our project has been a really big challenge. But we knew it could have a great impact on the beneficiaries because it allows them not only to reduce their carbon emissions, live in a more healthy environment, but also get additional income for their families through selling the carbon credits. So we knew that it had huge potential. And one of the tips that I would give to our fellow youth is that don't be afraid to start small. So one of the things that we did, because we were having such challenges with fundraising from big donors and funders, what we did was a crowdfunding a campaign. And so we were able to kind of really showcase our technological solutions, our kind of theory of change, social impact through a crowdfunding campaign. And that we were able to raise about 70,000 USD. And with that funding, we were able to build a small pilot program with 4 families. And once that kind of pilot was proven successful and we had engaged enough beneficiaries, we approached kind of big international development funders like the Asia Foundation and the UNDP. And then kind of it took off from there. So now we're currently working on transitioning 100 households to renewable energy and connecting them to the carbon market scheme in Mongolia. And because air pollution is such a big issue in my city, I think that kind of really, this project really showcases a different way to help solve that big monsters problem, because we've been trying to solve this issue for the past 20, 30 years. And I think this project really is kind of showing a way where youth is engaged, where technology and innovation is being used.
Thank you so much, Daria. And I'm sure there's a million questions, but this is a really exciting point about starting small and how you used ingenuity, if you will, in order to start small and do something that was innovative in your context and in another context as well. And I wanted to just add to this is this idea of raising funds for your initiative through something called social enterprise, so business for social good. So it doesn't always have to be straight in the nonprofit sector, but you can also raise funding for ideas that are important to you. And I noticed one of the questions was about gender and climate, for example, and I would like to offer my email afterwards to respond more fully to some of the questions that I'm not able to. But this idea of looking at really interesting strategies, most of us are familiar with Tom's shoes, for better or worse, but it's an idea of using the solution or the challenge they were trying to, I listened to a recording recently, wasn't that they wanted to design shoes, but there was a need for more shoes. And so how they designed shoes in a way that one pair of shoes for everyone that purchased a pair of shoes. So there are so many incredible social enterprises that are another aspect you can explore. And I've also included some resources on that. So just briefly, you will again have opportunity to explore all these links, but the whole corporate sector, I've put some examples of funding sources and strategies. Certainly when it comes to government and education, I extended some links that connected more to the Canadian context, but most of these links allow you to explore other areas and regions as well. And then some really good NGO search engines where you can begin to look at opportunities that for like at one site, you can look for grants throughout the NGO sector. I did also provide a link to the Youth Cafe because they're a youth organization that's actually giving out grants and their process as well and how they're going about that. So those are just a range of funding sources. And again, this idea of ingenuity. So Daria mentioned GoFundMe. There are a whole range of projects and how to set up GoFundMe pages. I had a student or group of students that were connected to a library at Mathari, and they started on GoFundMe, but then used partnerships and donations to really build out what they're doing. So and then there's some toolkits on how to create a social enterprise. Now, there are other kinds of funding that would probably require most youth organizations to connect to another type of organization, such as a university or international non-government organization. And so I know, for example, the G7, because I've been involved in this Education in Emergencies initiative, the Charlevoix programs is set out in the guidelines with the government. The government then puts a call together. And really, that's a point, if you watch those government sites for the larger funding, that's where there's an opportunity to partner with other organizations to put your ideas forward. And so these are multilateral and bilateral initiatives, but they're another example of types of places and spaces for funding. So one of the first steps you're going to need is a concept or a concept note. And these are pretty typical in terms of a project title, objective, background, and so on. And most proposals outline those for you, including the budget guidelines and resources. And so again, I've linked a few in this presentation for you, as well as a current call. It's from our Purpose Earth, and it's you might find that you could submit a project there. Their application process looks quite seamless, and so that's a big plus. But if you use funds for NGOs, for example, I started to play with all the ideas that were shared with me, and there are current calls or coming up calls where you could begin to explore funding from donors beyond the ideas of partnerships and crowdsourcing. A few of you are really interested in films, and there are some exciting ways and opportunities and collaborations that you could consider related to looking for funding for films. And I've provided these for you as well. And because we have 15 minutes left and I want to do the competition idea, I just want to briefly speak to budgets. Budgets are tricky. And to do a good budget, you need to spend time reading the directive from the donor. And often the donor will tell you what percentage has to come in kind from your organization, or not just by money, but by giving of time. You need to be clear how each activity in your theory of change is accounted for in your budget and what that amount is. And then think about overhead costs and so on. A lot of donors provide a spreadsheet, and the percentages are calculated for you and the guidelines as well. So again, what becomes really helpful is partnering or collaborating or working with a mentor in terms of the budget, because each budget is very different. And I also provided a link to a really interesting grant there. Some of the key tips for budget, as was already shared, it's not just your funder's vision, but your funder's requirements. They like to see that you're bringing something to the table, even if it's not matching funds, it's matching in terms of in-kind or time. And so the narrative or the story you tell about your project has to align with your budget. And again, I provided some resources for you there as well. One of the recent grants, successful grants I was part of, was from the International Development Research Centre of Canada. And you'll see that they provide the categories, they help you organize by the year, and then the percentages that you're allowed to put in. And if you go to the tabs along the bottom, you'll see that they put in for travel, but how much of a percentage travel can be, what can be indirect, what is research. And so a lot of the guidelines are there. It's a bit like a puzzle, but you get better at it as you go through the process. Okay, so here we are coming towards the end of our session, and I don't see our corporate representative here yet. I think we're going to have to do another session if Stephen doesn't come soon. But what I would like to do is give 7 to 10 of the groups that came with an idea, 1 minute to pitch their idea. And then we have a poll, we're going to vote. And the person with the idea that gets the most votes will get two things. They'll get a $50 US to help them organize their time to move to the next stage, and a little bit of time with me. And I'm going to offer maybe even Karun. So let's go. Who are the 7 groups that would like to do the 1 minute pitch? 7 people that are willing to try 1 minute. And what we're looking for in your 1 minute is, let's just choose 1 or 2. What is the challenge and the problem, and how are you going to measure success? Why don't we just start with that? The challenge, the problem, and how you're going to measure success. So anyone that's in the Zoom room that thinks they would like to try a 1 minute, please just put your name in the chat and we'll start. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a few. Or does this feel too overwhelming? Okay. Can I volunteer someone? Anyone want to go? 1 minute. An idea that you have, pitch it to us.
Okay, Dr. Shri, I have already an idea, so maybe I can, do this.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so should I just talk now?
Go ahead.
Perfect. So my idea, it's an idea of a project I already was working on. So it is the issue of the perception of safety for women in Egypt. So in Egypt, public spaces are usually not safe for women. So women are not using these public spaces such as men. There is a very difference and very gendered spaces. Of course, not in all places, but in most common and local areas. So my idea or my perspective is how to work with the built environment, urban design, and public spaces, how to create some interventions that can make these places like streets and public spaces more safe, or improve the perception of safety for these women using the places. So through this challenge, my indicators would be the accessibility, how many women are actually now using, after the project, are using these public spaces, and how their activities have changed. This will be measured through observations and through questionnaires to see how their activities and their participation in these public spaces have changed after the interventions. So that's it.
Okay, so there's number 1. I think Paul's going to go next. Go ahead, Paul. Paul,
yes,
are you ready? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Paul from Uganda, the refugee settlement. The discussion for today has really been so good and inspiring to us. And because really it is corresponding to some of the challenges and issues that we're having in our community. So as one of an idea that I had developed, is not of now, but I have developed it earlier because I have one of the refugee-led organizations that I head here in Uganda. So we had an issue on teenage pregnancies in where we are currently. This has been a major challenge which is happening currently, where you see most girls, like a lot of girls, they get pregnant at early ages. See, most of them now don't have the opportunities to get into school. They don't study, and this is just like now happening in all communities. And we had come with an idea of trying to do a sensitization, trying to move from all these clusters of the settlement to make sure that we advocate at least for policies that can help improve, those ways or like those causes of the teenage pregnancies that are happening currently randomly in our settlement. So this, we had looked in a way that we can be involving these stakeholders, the other upper stakeholders like the UNHCR, the OPM, then the district local government, so that we have advocacy meetings with them to see that they also put their effort to see there are those issues of norms which are happening in our community. But now you see that us as the refugee-led organizations which are yet upcoming, we have, little power to sometimes put an end to those. So sometimes now when these interventions are brought together with the government, you see that a quick response, like a quick change, would come definitely. So we are looking at least by the end of 1 to 2 years, we could be able to reduce this and make sure that we provide a space for these mothers, teenage mothers, to get back to their education.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So let's try a couple more, just 1 minute. I don't know, Daria, do you want to try Valerim or Lala?
I can talk about one of the projects I implemented last year. It was about the gender-based violence, like we are fighting against the gender-based violence, because in rural areas in my country, unfortunately, gender-based violence, especially domestic violence, is so normalized. So especially women, they don't take it like something important, and they cannot fight against it because of the gender stereotypes. They think that they are physically weaker than men. Therefore, to contribute to solution of this issue, last year we organized self-defense classes, training sessions for women living in rural areas. So actually the project consists of 2 parts. In the first phase of the project, we organize informative seminars on human rights and gender equality. And then the next phase was that we organized self-defense classes where we taught girls and the women how to defend themselves in the case of any physical attack. So they learned these martial art techniques. And yeah, this is the issue, and this is our way to approach the solution of the issue.
Thanks. And are you looking for more funding for that?
Yeah, actually, because this issue is so like common in other regions of my country, unfortunately. So I want to implement this project in more areas so I can reach more women and I can teach them the self-defense techniques.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have time for 3 more before we vote. Anyone else want to go? And they're all important. Valerin, do you want to talk about your sanitation idea? Oh, sorry, Benit just, is it Benit? Just turned, go ahead.
My name is Benitez from Kenya, and our project we are doing on, we are trying to solve land degradation and in the fight against climate change. So communities around Lake Baringo in Kenya, they are practicing unsustainable land practices. And as +1 3 initiative, we have launched an initiative such that we are training communities and people living around those areas on sustainable farming practices and how they can they can solve the problem of land degradation as well as trying to solve the problem of food insecurity. So we've launched a project where we make the communities to plant the trees, and they adopt some of the fruit trees and also grow maize. And because they are also pastoral communities, we've introduced grass. So they will have to plant some grasses so that to reduce soil erosion along those degraded areas. So that's some of the activities that we have done, and we are doing it with schools across the area, and we have partnered with primary schools and high schools. So we are carrying out awareness on importance of growing and planting trees, and also scattering seeds.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have time for 2 more, has to be under 1 minute. Joan and then Eva.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Joan Odhiambo from Kenya. Okay, so my idea is I come from a certain village in Kisumu County called Nyakach. And the major problem they are facing here is deforestation. It's a small hill but the people there in the village are doing grazing, charcoal burning, illegal logging, which is affecting the area because it's experiencing too much drought. So I was thinking of a way to promote the forest conservation, maybe through planting of trees and conducting some training and maybe capacity building of the people around the area so that we can look for a way forward to maybe conserve the forest so that we can avoid these problems.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, perfect. Okay, our last one, Eva, and then we're going to do a quick poll. Go ahead, Eva. Oh, okay. Just, Eva, are you still wanting to, or? Okay, so
Sherry,
go
can
ahead.
I quickly jump in?
Yes.
So we also had this issue that Beatrice wrote it in the chat. She's trying to raise my hand, but I can't find the icon on the screen, and it's been
Okay.
quite some time. Maybe we could give her a shot.
Sure, sure. Let's do that. I'm just cognizant of our hour. So sure, let's do those two and then we'll do our poll. My summary thoughts are on the slide, so please read them. Go ahead. Who's ready? Beatrice or who's?
Hi, I'm Beatriz. I'm from Brazil, and me and my team we just won the Young Game Chain Global Minecraft challenge. So our project is quite small. It's just a public space in a neglected area of our city of people that doesn't have much. And our main idea is to face safety challenges when it comes to public spaces, because usually public spaces in Brazil that doesn't have many activities like playground, a skate park, and a market, like everything together. The people are not there, and then they are not safe. So people don't go there. So it's a cycle that we want to break. And our main idea was to bring the young people to the public spaces, because nowadays the children and teenagers are just go to school and they go back to home where it's safe, so they don't enjoy the public space. So our main idea is to put a lot of different activities in an area, in a public area, in a public space that is quite empty. So that's our main idea. And
That's great. Well, I think, I don't know, Eva went that I've seen some of the competitions, so well done on that. And thank you for sharing. So I think we're out of time. I don't know, Eva went in and out. I don't know, Olga, can we just do a quick poll?
We can do the poll, but I really need idea number 2. Yes, so I now saw it in the chat. It's training communities on importance of restoration of degraded lands.
Yes.
Okay, good. So let me quickly put it in the chat and then I will launch a poll. Give me 1 minute.
Okay, and just while Olga's doing the poll, just some summary thoughts is there's so much learning and expertise in this room, virtually as well as on YouTube. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all the questions. Certainly the gender and intersectionality as so critical in terms of priorities of donors, and the current funding landscape is really rethinking partnerships. And just the last point, we need to have a bit of ingenuity to have some edge and be willing to fail and then build on that failure. So let's just turn it over to the poll. So when the poll's launched, we should be able to vote. Myrna, did you have a question, or anyone have a question just while we're waiting for the poll? Okay.
Very quickly, Sherry, could you please check on your end if you can launch a poll as a host?
Oh, okay, just 1 sec. Here we go. The poll is launched. So if everyone could just vote on the idea that really stands out to you. And I think with that, once we're done that, I just want to thank everyone. And I just feel like we need another session and maybe bring in the corporate sector for that session. Okay. So
Yeah.
quick.
So one of the things that
Yeah,
can I just
sure.
add quickly? So
Yes.
so I work for a foundation, a water and sanitation foundation, and I'm the operations manager. Here, I'll just put my camera on. I'm the operations manager, so I don't interact with the donors, but many of our donors are corporations. And one of the things that I have to tell our board all the time is that the cost of acquiring a partnership is actually quite high. And so what we're really looking for are ongoing partners. And there's a really big cost for a donor in getting, having a relationship and then monitoring that relationship, maintaining it, assessing what capacity that organization then has to absorb more funding. And so what I've done in recent times, because we do get unsolicited applications, is I've actually just said, listen, I'll ask you a few questions about your project, and instead of going through a lengthy process, I'll send you a very small amount of money and see what you do with it. And write me back, use it, figure out how you could make an impact. So I asked him, what would you do with like 500 euros? And it was really interesting. I did this in Zambia, and it was a kind of really interesting. We did this in Zambia and in India to see what actually comes back. So, I mean, one thought would be to actually propose kind of a pre-phase, a get to know you, where you invest a little bit of time, maybe disproportionate to the amount of actual money, but that covers a little bit, just to give the donor a sense of here's the kind of thing that you could expect, right? The other thing that I would suggest from the perspective of a donor, the product is actually the story. So don't forget that the story that you're telling and the story has to actually relate to something real. It can't just make it up, but the story is really important. So what that 500 euros does is give the donor a sense of what they're getting. What's the product? Well, the product is actually the story, the pictures, the reports. And so if you can show them you're really great at implementing something, but you're also really great at sending them a really great set of materials that illustrate what you've done, well, that give them some confidence that you're actually a good manager of their money, and that you'd be worth investing in a relationship with, because they're going to want to fund you again after they've seen what you can do. At least from my perspective, we might invest $3,000 or $4,000 in going to visit a project after after we funded it. Not going to do that every single year. So we want that investment to bear fruit and actually have an ongoing relationship. So just a few tips from a kind of a foundation perspective on how you might approach. All right, thanks.
Okay, so I can see the winner in the chat. I mean, based on the results of the poll, we had 37%, which is the biggest the biggest percentage for the idea of study of women's perception of safety in public spaces. That's gonna be the winner for today. We have the second place also going to denormalize gender-based violence in rural areas, which is also great with this 26%. Then we have a tie between training communities on importance of restoration of degraded land, as well as support sustainable land and farming practices, and fighting deforestation through tree planting and building capacities. And I think they all received 11%. And I think this is interesting that these are all kind of interrelated topics, at least I think for me, so that you guys can also maybe collaborate and then work on it together. So yeah, congratulations for the idea number 1. I think it was idea number 1, perception of women of public spaces.
I think it's Zaina.
And goes to Zaina. Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Reach out to me, Zaina. And the last thing, thank you for everyone that participated. I hope that you'll find content in the presentation that will help you move forward with your ideas, and best of luck with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. You can also find this presentation in the chat as well as on your email. And the recording will be available freely on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, UN Habitat Youth. We have a lot coming in. And yeah, thank you so much for joining in. It was a very productive session. Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.